Hi, and welcome to the October product update from MobileCaddy. On the call joining me today, I have Paul, our CTO, Todd, our mobile chief technical architect, and Frank, our lead product engineer. As has become the norm, we've picked out a number of the updates from this month to talk through and give a bit more detail. We have our full release notes available on the developer site, that's developer.mobilecaddy.net. So without further ado, let's move in to the update. This month, or the month that we've just come from, has been, as many of you will know, a major release in the cycle for Salesforce. So the spring, summer, winter, we're now on winter 18. So a big proportion of our time during the last cycle has been on a lot of pre-release testing, testing through Salesforce sandbox environments, and then finally, as we've now just picked over the edge to production environments, retesting there. So we've got some blog posts about how we handle that, which is quite interesting, which we'll link to in the post that goes along with this update. But if we can get into the meat now of some of the updates that we want to dig a little bit more detail into. The first area is something that many of you will have used to start your projects, which are known as our starter apps, which come in two flavors, our seed and the shell applications. Todd, we've got some updates around some templates and new ways to start particular applications. How are we doing then? What have we got new coming up?
Hi, Justin. Yes, as you said, these are the skeleton or base apps really that are used to make sure that the build starts are quick and easy to get something running as fast as possible. And as you said, at the moment we have this seed application, which is in essence a kind of demo application to show people how the apps can work, and the other ones are the shell applications, and these really are very bare bone apps that just maybe implement kind of navigation structures, so a kind of a sidebar navigation or tab navigation. And what we've seen actually is the demand for the POCs, since they really help kind of seal the deal, I suppose, is we've put together a new starter which is aimed particularly at building proof of concepts. And the one we have at the moment, the first one I should say that's been released, is an accounts and contacts explorer designed for tablet use. So it's got a nice kind of a side area for listing accounts, and as you click into them, the details come up showing contacts and then other records. And the idea being here is this is very easily extendable for partners and customers to quickly implement other tables. So they could just swap out some of the database tables for other ones that are more suitable for their use. They can reskin them very quickly. And I think that we've seen that that's been a real benefit to us internally as much as to our partners. So yeah, very excited to see that that being used out there. I should say that the new templates are kind of automatically available to anyone building applications now. So if they do a MobileCaddy templates command via our CLI, they will see this new template listed there, and they can get started straight away. So yeah, hopefully it'll be the first of many, potentially targeting different niches or different industries. So yeah, the future's looking good on that, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. You've covered how that would be, pulled in from a developer side, as these use standard objects that come out the box with all of the sort of developer type orgs that you get from Salesforce, and the standard objects that you have in your sandbox or production orgs. These will slip right in with a minimum amount of configuration. So as a point to Todd's point there, really on the POCs, or for the quick start of a project, getting some early MVP into users' hands. And Todd, I suppose, just to give a flavour, the restriction in terms of, or non-restriction, if this particular template, but of course any template, it would be quite feasible to change those objects out for custom objects or whatever, and maintain the template and use the sort of UI and the routing that's pre-built, again giving us a bit more speed.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of tricks you can use to reuse the application with, as you said, standard objects, other standard objects or custom objects, just through the table configuration on the platform, and that's all kind of point and click. and yeah, very seamless.
Excellent. Thanks, Todd. That's great, and been really good to see how these develop, and not just the template itself that we're talking about now develop, but the other ones come on stream as well, and a nod really to a higher usage of tablets in some industries where there's maybe more hard or heavier data entry into. Changing gears now and then thinking about the data coming backward and forward from applications. Of course, that's a main thing for us to maintain network resilience across any application, regardless whether it's tablet, phone, or laptop. Paul, we have an aggressive timetable on our sync class and output. You've got another version dropping as we talk. Maybe we can dig in a little bit of detail around what we're calling Sync 5 now, I believe.
Yes, of course, Justin. Yes, Sync 5. It's another one of our internal names. Must apologise for these, but yeah, Sync 5 is just coming out. If you remember from last month, we did talk about Sync 4, which introduced paging and batching, so that customers could pull down their data, and if there are large amounts of data, we can actually operate that. The data will come down, and we can page it. Page 1, page 2, etc. The data will come down. Now, what we did find was before we had paging, i.e., prior to Sync 4, we did have a facility for what we call formula field, cross-object formula field handling. And if I just give a bit of background to that, in Salesforce, it is possible to create formula fields, such as those that point cross-object. So you might have a contact pointing to a new custom field on account, for example. The account field changes, your contact record itself wouldn't register a change at that time, i.e. the last modified date of the underlying system mod stamp would not change on the record. Another way of achieving such a result rather, would be if you created a formula field that, for example, gave the current time in milliseconds. Again, you read the record, the data would change every time, but it wouldn't register a change. And what we did in MobileCaddy prior to the paging, prior to Sync 4, was we had a fairly complex hashing mechanism. I won't go into the detail of that, but it did allow us to spot the changes when refreshing the data. But the internal changes required for paging meant that we had to set that aside, and that wasn't supported in Sync 4. So what we've actually done in Sync 5, Justin, is, as well as having our paging and batching and so on, we've extended it. We've done a light touch, a step on the way towards this analysis of data that actually has changed via a formula field. And what we do is we allow the customer now to, or the administrator, when configuring the table, to mark a field as always refresh. And that means that when the data is pulled down onto the device, and it's obviously changed, or it may well have changed under the bonnet by one of these formula fields, MobileCaddy will spot that they have actually defined at least one field in the record as always refresh, and it will then bring the data down. So there's no danger. One of these cross-object formula fields or changing formula fields is vital. There's no danger that will be missed. So that's probably the first step on the way, Justin, in terms of our Sync 5, i.e. paging with formula fields.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Paul. And it is one of those subjects, actually, once you start digging into the detail, can get quite complex, just purely because of the way that formula fields are implemented with Salesforce and only being rendered and calculated at the interface layer and on the platform side. So it's one of those things that may not be obvious at first, but there are a couple of hints and tricks to help understand which formula fields may or may not be affected. But this is helpful because I can then resolve that with minimal impact to me if I'm doing the data configuration on MobileCaddy. Paul, one of the things I know that links in with this is that we've got two different options in terms of restriction that we often talk about, and we call that the basic and advanced or platform class as the second. There is a linkage here that's important as well, isn't there, between how I think about the restriction of data in the platform class and potentially what that would mean going forward with the new sync implementation?
Absolutely right, Justin. Yes, we have several means of restricting the data when we define a mobile table, and a more advanced one that you can't achieve via a formula field. You seem to be touching on formula fields a lot here, but yeah, it is an advanced restriction is basically a restriction on data coming down from an object that you implement via an external Apex class. It's something that's quite complex. So I don't know, for example, if you wanted to pull down all contacts where the account is based in a certain area and the contact's got a blue car, just making something up, for example, and you couldn't achieve that via formula fields. You could write an Apex class and we could plug that into the platform, and many customers have done this, and we call that the platform class. And again, from my first explanation of Sync 5, the underlying implementation has had to change because we're now using paging, Justin. So it's very important that really at a high level, the platform class must now be able to tell MobileCaddy that I have now got all of my data, or there is more data to come, and we're making that easy for the customer. We're implementing a second. Customers who have implemented this, they'll understand that they need to implement what we call an Apex interface. At a high level, we've actually introduced another interface that the customer can use. MobileCaddy will automatically detect whether they're using the new version or the old version. If a customer intends to use paging on large quantities of data, then we need to know whether or not they've used, there's more data to query, Justin, from the database, on the subsequent paging call, and therefore there's a new interface to use, a very minor change, but then that's coming in Sync 5, obviously with instructions as to how to use it. But current customers with platform classes, rest assured, they won't need to change anything.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I think that obviously the core of an application built for Salesforce, a mobile application, is going to be moving data around. Our aim is always to move that data as efficiently as possible. As we move up the stack in terms of scale of data, we want to be able to support that too, but also support the complexity of some of these queries. So, this is a really important step on the way now to really bringing it all into one area. And allowing both the large volumes of data and also to handle some of these oddities of the platform, such as the cross-object formulas and the calculated formulas that you mentioned. That's really helpful. So, Paul, just as a note to that, then, as that comes through into the package, from an update of a DV perspective, I think you covered this on the last product update. Is that a similar process for me then if I'm on a Sync 4, Sync 3? I assume I update the package and then I can start to use the DV to gain access to this new functionality.
Absolutely, Justin. What you'll find is that you'll upgrade the package, and those customers who have recently upgraded packages will find that as soon as they go in and attempt to clone a dynamic version, or to mobilize something, they'll be asked to update their MobileCaddy components. Once they're updated from the installed package, everything is then set up. So as soon as they hit clone DV to clone their dynamic version, one of the options there is in the list now is Sync 5. So they'll be able to go straight up to Sync 5 and have all of this wonderful new functionality at their beck and call.
Thanks, Paul. And that's becoming, as hopefully anyone using MobileCaddy or listening to the calls will see, these types of updates, they're always protecting the underlying or running version of the application. So as Paul was mentioning, your previous versions will be protected from these upgrades, and only by your actions will you consume this new functionality, and then it be partitioned in the production org to allow you to release and test with a high level of confidence. So, yeah, really, really good. Todd, alongside that, if I can switch over to you, there's some work been done, I believe, from a support side. So we're now talking about the MC resource which is the library being used for the developer, and then move to the platform for these. I think you've got something to cover on the Sync 5 support, as well as another item or two on the MC resource generally.
Yes, Justin, that's right. So with the Sync 5 coming through on the platform side within the package, we have an update to the MC resources, to the MobileCaddy utils, to also support those Sync 5 kind of calls. This is currently in pre-release and will be dropped alongside the platform package as well. So that's all going well, going through. As you said, we do have another item. In fact, I suppose the only thing really of note in here is a bug fix that was implemented in this release, and this is for a really strange kind of race condition to do with offline record creations with parent and child, and the syncing. It was rarely seen bug, and it would have been really hard to spot, actually, I believe, if not for our mobile logs that we have in place that come up and get reported back to the orgs. And so when we got hold of these mobile logs, we could see this error. And in fact, I was able to get out the line number of the code where the error had occurred. And so quite easily put a fix together for this, kind of diagnose it, write some tests, and run it through the development process and get it through QA. Yeah, I've got to say, I love the mobile logs. They, in terms of bug reports, they give me so much information. So yeah, there is a fix in the MC resource package as well as that Sync 5 support. I don't think there's anything else I know in the utils actually this month. Those are the two biggies.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. I think that's really great. So the Sync 5 hand in hand coming out with the package upgrade. And we've also, as you're saying about this fix, I think the one element to note there is the use of mobile logs. And as we come through on the calls, we'll see more interest around the logs and logging. If anyone is on the call that hasn't used the logging system yet, and this is production logging as well as through the development process, it is not just very handy for our own libraries, but also for the applications that you're building. One of the calls I had recently where we're being evaluated as a product is around sort of stability and visibility, and this is exactly the use case here to make sure that you can replay the actions of the user and pick up items that would be very difficult to pick up elsewise. In that, and thinking about the sort of general robustness and going forward, we've got Frank on the line as well, who has been heavily involved, Frank, with the container app testing. So these are the installables for iOS, Android, and Windows. Through, as I mentioned at the top of the call, we're rolled into Winter 18. Frank, a lot of pre-release tests, sandbox tests, and finally production tests. You've got an update for us for the 3 targeted OSs.
Hi all, yeah, that's right. So as you know, Winter 18 is just released, and around this time before it's released, and as soon as we have access to the pre-release orgs, we pour a lot of resources and time into testing that they all work across our container apps on all of those 3 OSs that you mentioned. So Windows 10, iOS, and Android. So I guess the first thing to say is that our tests have all fully passed on all of our OSs that we support, so that's really good news. And as I think we mentioned in our previous podcast, that as soon as we see any issues, we raise them as high as we can. This time we went all the way to Salesforce at the patch level and get them fixed, and continued testing every single day until the release dropped, just to make sure nothing has changed. That fixes haven't been removed from the release. So yes, it's all good, really. Happy to report all the green lights.
Thanks, Frank. That's always good to hear. And I believe, Todd, you may have published a post recently on our interactions with Salesforce on the main blog site. Is that correct?
Yes, yeah, that post went out a couple of days ago, I believe, detailing kind of the process that Frank has mentioned, which is around kind of not just checking that things are working as we go through, but checking every day throughout pre-release, because of the patches that come through, that items haven't been reintroduced or new bugs haven't been put in as the release rolls on. And so the blog post mentions all of that, and kind of our interactions with the Salesforce chaps, who I've got to say were actually really, really useful. In this particular case, they were kind of very understanding of what was going on, and I think quite grateful for us to bring them a kind of a bug report like we did, with the information that we're able to pass them. So yeah, I'd like to say it's a good read, but then I kind of wrote it, so I will say that.
Understand. That's good. And while we got you on then, let's as we come to the sort of end of the primary or the key items we want to bring up this call. We mentioned earlier the starter apps and their purpose and so on, and of course they then do become they form the basis of the production apps for our clients and partners using them. Todd, you've got some interesting advancements and some enrichments, if you like, to how we're treating the starter apps and viewing them. And I know this is a longer term plan, but maybe you could just introduce us to this some of the new approaches and high level the benefits that we're going to see coming forward.
Sure. Yes, will do. So this actually, I was having this whole kind of so I'm going to call it a re-architecting. It's kind of re-architecting part of the way that the code flow development environment works hand in hand with the shell and starter apps. And actually, this came out of a conversation I was having with our latest intern. To kind of she's helping build out one of our kind of demonstration apps, and we were talking about adding some new services to this application, and how it might be good actually for this code that we're writing to be available to other devs and easily importable, because that kind of it could seem to be good code reuse and likely to want to be a function of other apps. And out of that we had some discussions, and so what we've done is what we're heading towards now is pulling out some of the core features of the shell and starter apps. So things such as the settings areas, the deploy process, at the moment kind of baked in. We're going to be pulling these out and having them as dependencies. They're actually installed as part of the workflow via the package manager. So not only does this mean that if you've got an existing service that we as MobileCaddy might update, so for example we might update the deploy process to do some further checking or something, instead of having to pull this in via manual copying of files and lots of copy and pasting from kind of instruction documents, they now become more like a single npm update type command that can be run. So this will be really useful. The first service that we've got kind of sort of going through, I suppose, kind of sanity checking is our REST service, which enables devs to easily access the sort of kind of custom and standard REST APIs that live on Salesforce. And a couple of partners are using that, but they've been having to kind of do this manual copying of files over and things. And obviously, the more manual steps you've got, the more errors are likely to come into the flow. And so I've been running with that, and that looks really good. Another example of how this could easily be used is the update to the diagnostics services that we've put into the shell apps now, that have already been found to be really, really useful on the few apps that we have out there. But the steps to include this aren't kind of trivial. So this will be one of the first services we'll put through, or updates that we'll put on will be this diagnostics area. So then can just be included in anyone's app just by running a kind of npm install MobileCaddy add-on diagnostics, for example, some kind of command like that. And as well as kind of, I suppose, including new features into your apps via this process, and kind of updating the ones you've got when you know there's an update. What we'll be able to do is include, because all these kind of modules will be packages in their own right, they'll have their own versions, and therefore we'll be able to include those within our Genesis box, and that will mean that we're able to give devs, for example, notification that there's a new version of, let's say, the deploy process has come out, and we recommend they update. Or we could even say, well, actually, you've got a dependency clash here between these packages now. So I think it's given us a really good kind of roadmap of where to go with these apps, to make it not just easier for devs to maintain their applications and keep them up to date, but also include the code that we're writing for these common services. So it's, yeah, I'm quite excited about all of that, and hopefully be dropping soon.
Yeah, I definitely echo the excitement there. I think that it's a natural extension of being able to bring the speed to the development. Of course, bringing in these items, but most importantly, we all know the hassles we have for dependencies across the board, not just isolated to MobileCaddy here, but keeping everything in check and balance, and that really goes across everything. And I just really want to end the call, Todd. I think that's an excellent step forward, and I'll be looking forward to seeing the first releases of those. When we look at what we covered today, which is the starter apps, the new sync classes, the testing and updates that Frank has covered in the container apps, all of these are working pieces that form to the end user just a single application. But of course, we want to iterate on these, and of course there are changes to the environment. And so, just echoing really what Todd was saying about the Genesis system that we have, we'll be talking more and more about this. But Paul, I would say across the board, we now consider Genesis to be an integral part of the product. Is that fair? The priority that we're giving ensuring that things are compatible, and that actually the effort involved to consume them is always minimized.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting you say that. We had an internal meeting only this week, and one of the things that struck me was that the teams are all now, whenever there's a question internally, such as I have a new, it might be a MobileCaddy component, like Salesforce have introduced a new field type, for example, and we're testing it and introducing that, or Todd and his team have produced a new set of utils, or we've got this new Sync 5 class coming out. The first thing we do before actually designing and pulling it into MobileCaddy itself, actually building it, is to go to our Genesis environment, our Genesis box, our internal database of how all these components interrelate, and we pump it in there, to go in there and analyze where all the dependencies are and put them in there, so that and everything then drives out of that. Justin, I mean, it's not complete. But we're many steps on the way to having a full system that we can just press a button to pump out our dependencies. But at the moment, they're defined in there, and that seems to be our route one when introducing something new.
Yeah, I love it, Paul. I think it's great. And of course, that has also an impact where Frank was covering on the container apps, where the register of all the apps that we have is building through, going in, and we can also spot early dependency issues and be able to alert with the alerts and monitoring. So if you are listening to this, we do also, with the sister to this release, we always put out an alerts and monitoring update alongside this product update post, which would just inform you of anything coming up that's changing in the environment across the board, both internal for us, Salesforce as an environment, and also the wider external environments, such as the operating systems, for example. So that's well worth a skim. It's a summary of all of the items going on, and just a real quick, brief read to understand if there's any impact or anything that we should be aware of as things inevitably change. So I think with that, we've covered some real big items this month. As I say, the developer site has the release notes on if you want to dig any deeper. If you want to have these items added, the package release will be coming through, and the MC resource, as normal, can be consumed through the release notes with full instructions of how to consume them, both for the CodeFlow environment and then onto the platform for your application. So that wraps us up. Thanks, Paul, Todd, and Frank, as always. If there's any ideas or feature requests that may have been stimulated through the conversations we had today, please let us know. We have a standing email, info@mobilecaddy.net, or you'll find us on all the social channels. And I think that wraps us up. So thanks very much.